Hey, what's up? This is Jake. You're in Jake's shop. I'm gonna go ahead and do some painting today. I'm gonna show you guys how I like to prep primer right before paint, how I like to sand it, what types of sandpaper and blocks I like to use, and we'll go ahead and prep this off on camera, and we'll shoot some paint on camera, and you'll see what it turns out like before and after. So let's get going. I'll flip the camera around. We'll take a look at these parts. Okay, real quick, here's the parts we're gonna prep and go ahead and paint this afternoon. I don't really want these in my shop. You know, these are the lower valences of the car, rear fin of the car, lower valence up over there, and this is actually the upper cowl valence. I'm not going to paint that one, but I'm going to paint these ones. Basically, there's a lot of pearl in this paint. I really want it to lay out the same way. But these lower parts you'll never see, you'll never notice, and they get painted separately anyways because they're so low on the car. But we're going to go ahead and prep this. We'll do some sanding. You know, part of my thought process in getting these painted is to get them out of the shop before I do final blocking, more priming and blocking on this car. You know, this car is going to get rolled back, more centered in the space here, and then it'll be masked off to the floor. It'll be grounded. There's a lot more to do there. So if I can get these out of my way, get them taken care of, get some nice clear on them, get them back out of the booth, we'll go on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot primer on that off camera, finish sanding it, and then we'll go ahead and make ready for some paint, and I'll show you what I like to use for paper. Okay, so I've got the camera zoomed in right now to kind of show you these parts. They've all been 2K primered, and I like 2K primer. I've had good luck with it. I've got some other videos I've done on that. But as far as prepping the primer goes, for these old cars and this thick metal and how I like to do it, I dry sand. I like to do dry sanding. It works really well for me. Normally I'll be wearing a respirator when I'm dry sanding, but for a little quick demonstration, I'm not going to bother with it. But it works like this. Rule of thumb is 180 is my first step, and this is after all the main body work's done, and you know, you're not really sanding down mud. You're just getting the primer prepped, ready for paint. So I start off with 180. Well, actually, before I even do that, I shoot a guide coat, and what you kind of see on here, this black kind of haze, is just a rattle can, and I just held it back a little high, you know, a foot or so off, and just kind of hazed it real quick, just to give me a haze and a guide coat. And what you're going to see, I'm going to sand this on camera real quick, just a little bit with 180, and it kind of, you'll see, I've even thinned down the 2K primer so that it lays out a little better, but you'll see how it kind of stays up there. Now, when I'm sanding something like this, I'm using a soft block. You know, Durablock makes these thinner blocks, which are not very soft. There's a little flex in there, but not much. I've been having good luck with these soft blocks. A bunch of people make them. There's a bunch of guys online that like them as well. They are super flexible. You can see this one. This one's made by Motor Guard, which is the same people that make my filter, but just an Amazon special. You can see there's a line there. I actually like to put the paper on this side. This gray side's almost too squishy, at least for doing a panel like this. It's just got a little bit of curvature in it. I don't need it to be super squishy because I don't want indentations. That's the whole reason to use a block when you're sanding. You know, if you're using your bare hands and you got sandpaper, you could get your fingers in it. So 180 sandpaper, I'm gonna just stick it on here real quick to the dark side of this soft block. And then we'll kind of look at a little bit of what this looks like after I sand it. So I got a little fresh piece here. I was sanding on some other pieces. So just like anything when you're sanding, you know, you go both directions, and you can see it's cutting through pretty quickly, and you can kind of get the idea of, you know, and so this way and then this way. And I like to do 180 first. You know, that cuts it down a little quicker than the 320. And just kind of gets me an idea where things are at. You know, this will also show you if you have any imperfections you need to deal with when it comes to body work, which, you know, come back in there and fill. Now, these are actually, these two lower valence pieces are actually aftermarket parts that I bought brand new. I haven't done a whole lot to them. I did shoot them with some pretty thick primer coats here, so I'm interested to see what they turn out. And on these, I'm not as picky. You know, these are underneath the car. You're never going to see them. But you can see what's happening here. Hopefully you can see what's happening here in the camera. You can see where I've got a little bit showing through here and nothing back in here. Those are just areas that I still need a little more sanding. That's where, you know, I'm trying to get rid of fisheye. When it comes to shooting the base and the clear and everything on, I'm trying to eliminate it and keep it from doing any fisheye stuff. So again, that's kind of what this is looking like. You know, this is a pretty quick process. This stuff sands down pretty nicely. And doing it, well, caulking is not the easiest, but so you can see that that's getting there, right? And on these little edges and stuff like that, yeah, I'll take the sandpaper off. I won't bother using the soft block, and I'll just kind of get into these edges with my fingers really carefully, trying to keep it from burning through too bad. Burning through or cutting through, if there's a little metal exposure here eventually, once I get down a little lower, is not the end of the world because I'm using a sealer. And what you're gonna end up seeing later on in this video is when I'm shooting, you'll see the sealer I use and some of the stuff I actually shoot with. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish sanding this off camera. Again, this is my 180 paper, and then once I got it cut down, if there's a little showing through here, it's fine. I'll go to my 320, and I'll sand everything with 320. I'd like to sand all these parts with 180 first, go to 320, and then we'll come back, and after that, they're pretty much ready to go. Okay, so kind of the next step in the process, obviously I talked earlier about sanding it down 180, then 320, dry sanded everything. Here's a good example of what a piece would look like pretty much ready for paint, but not really. Here's some of the next steps. Obviously shot a little video there of how I'm setting this up. I like to wrap my stands up, keep them nice and elevated so when I do go to paint them, I can get around everything really well. Another trick well, here, I'll show you what the sanded product looks like. Try and zoom in, try and get a little bit better look at it. But you can see where I burned through slightly on some of those edges. That's okay. I'm going to be running a sealer over the top of that. What's not okay is the fact that I'm touching it with my bare hands. I do have gloves. So that's really the biggest next step. After, you know, I've got it sanded down right, what I do is I use a wax and grease remover. This stuff needs to evaporate off properly. So it takes a little bit of time for that. You know, a lot of painting and body work, from what I find, is patience, which obviously I don't have still, but I'm getting there. But yeah, so wax and grease. Caden was in here helping me earlier, and he's still in here. Caden, would you mind getting me some of those blue towels that are in the bag on the shelf? Okay. So wax and grease remover. You can actually use a bunch of different things. Thinner even works, you know, lightly. At least the body guys I work with tell me that. My friends tell me that do body work. And even denatured alcohol will also work. So wax and grease, denatured alcohol works pretty good actually, and it flashes off pretty quick. So it's worked for me so far. Wax and grease is cheap, and I have a lot of it. So I always put it in these, you know, chemical resistant spritzer bottles and just kind of wet it down a little bit, and then I get a towel and wipe it down. wipe it the same direction. And I might even do it more than once, you know, depending on how dirty everything is. These are just a regular shop towel that I like to use. They don't, they're kind of, a lot of painting places use these because they don't really make a lot of frizzy little dust chemicals that can get in your stuff. Oh, and if you saw me earlier when I was making the racks here, this is just really light gauge sheet metal. It's really nice to use for something like this because I can just use my snips and just snip it, bend it, and then shoot a little screw in it. I like these little bit tip screws, just self drillers. They work pretty well for something like that. Hopefully you can kind of see that. You know, when I want to make something real quick for something like this, it's perfect. Get these up off of these stands so I can get paint all around them. And also keep junk from blowing up into these things. So now that I've got it wetted down, you know, I usually just go one direction. And you know, this is after I've blown everything off. This is after I've been sweeping the shop and blowing everything off. And then I'll kind of flip it around to the other side and I'll go the other direction. And just kind of inspect it, you know, make sure it's pretty clean. So that's my first wipe. And I'll probably come back and do another one here. Because I'm going to finish blowing off the floor and cleaning up and blowing the rest of these pieces off and then wipe these down. Once they're nice and wiped, I'll let these sit for 20-30 minutes in a 70-degree shop just to make sure that, even though it looks dry, just to make sure that wax and grease is the rest of the way out of there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip the script on this. I'm not going to bother painting these. I know I talked about it earlier in the video. With the temperature and humidity being such a factor, especially in the Pacific Northwest this time of year, I don't want to risk any discoloration. Even though I'm running a lot of pearl, not necessarily a lot of flake, and I'm not running a tri-coat, I'm still paranoid. The product's super expensive and I want to do it all in one shot. So, I've got enough space. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next steps here. We'll do a future video here in the next week or so of how I'm going to mask this thing off and keep prepping it and keep going on some of the other stuff with this Camaro. So hey, if you like this video at all, want to see some more updates on this car, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.